Hello, students of American literature. I'm talking to you today about Benjamin Franklin's remarks concerning the savages of North America. And I've come out to a particular location to talk about this. I am at the Martin Van Buren National Historic Site, but we don't really care much about Martin Van Buren, though of course if we're talking about Native Americans, the dreadful Trail of Tears did happen during his administration, but that's another story for another time. We're here today to talk about Franklin and in the colonial times, Native Americans and Franklin's view of them. So your discussion board, some of you picked this one to write about, a few of you did a pretty good job. Some of you did pick up on a very interesting point that you have to get to understand this essay. The savages Franklin is writing about are the white people. He's referring to the European descended people as the savages. And he's actually holding up the Native Americans as the model people, more model, the better people to follow. So if you missed that, hey, I probably missed it too when I read this as a student, but it is important. Franklin is actually upholding Native American, at least in this case, values, and really disparaging the European descended people. So that's really important. Some of the characteristics that he digs into, he gets into education, which I guess as an English professor I should maybe be a little offended about. But the Native Americans, some of them, he writes, went to college, white colleges, and they probably learned some of the things you're learning. And when they got back to the village, there's all kinds of stuff that they were unable to do. Hunt, right? Chop wood. Take a deer, kill an enemy. They spoke the language imperfectly. They didn't know how to build things. They lost any practical ability by learning, no doubt, many impractical things. So there's also the other thing that comes up is materialism. And the white people, of course, are so materialistic and money oriented. And you know, this is long ago that Franklin's writing this. Prior to the American Revolution, Franklin's writing this. And he points out the same thing here that he gets around to in The Way to Wealth, is that white people were so consumed with materialism, even then, that they had little time for leisure. They had little time for leisure. And the Native Americans have time for leisure and to talk, right, with one another. And this, of course, gives them a great value for conversation above material objects. And most of us don't live our lives valuing conversation over material things. We should. Research, psychologists have studied this, and we feel better about ourselves, about each other. We're happier and healthier the more conversations we have and the less gratuitous, excessive stuff that we have. Franklin had this figured out way back in the late 18th century. Franklin is no fan of Christianity in this essay. How the conversations that happened at the church in Albany, Franklin did spend time in Albany, is they are meeting to cheat the Native Americans, right? A Native American approaches, and they traded a lot of beaver pelts in Albany. They approach the white guy, and he says, "I don't do business on Sunday." And of course, he goes into church, talks to the other beaver pelt buyers, and says, you know, let's collude, which is illegal now. Let's not offer them any more than X amount of dollars, or not dollars, pounds, per beaver pelt. So they're cheating the Native Americans out of it. And Franklin just lays this all out in this 4 or 5 page essay. And even then, he's pointing out the savagery in American culture. He also writes about government and all of the yelling that takes place still takes place in American government and British government as well, as opposed to Native Americans who listen, who never cut each other off, and how they listen to the counsel of the elders. So many things. Now, what I really get out of this, and I hope you do as well, is the respect Franklin has for Native Americans, but the savagery that he sees in culture at that time, European American, English colonial culture at that time. And folks, we see it today or we do not see it today, right? There are lots of things we continue to do that savage people who are not Americans, and of course very frequently non-white. Much of the clothing that you're wearing right now, that I'm wearing right now, is made by people in parts of the world, Bangladesh, India, China, in horrible conditions. Absolutely horrible, unsafe working conditions. Much of the chocolate that we eat, unless you get fair trade chocolate, is harvested in a way that is detrimental to the people and the places in Africa that it's grown. And certainly coffee, we all love our coffee, right? How much of the rainforest is cut down for coffee in South America and Central America. So there are bad things done to people all over the world so that we can have more stuff here in the United States. An iPhone, a lot of you have Apple iPhones, right? What do they cost, $500 or $600? I know there's a plan, this one, that one, whatever. Someone did a study recently, actually a few years ago. If an iPhone was made in the United States, it would cost about $2,800 because people would get paid a halfway decent wage to build it. And iPhones are hand-built. Robots don't build those things, they're so small. But the factory that they're built in China, the Foxconn factory is the name of it. There are dormitories where young Chinese people live who make them, and you know what's on those dorms? Suicide nets. The work is so difficult, tedious, 14-hour days. They have to wear those, clean suits. It's very hard work to build those, that it's so hard they jump out of the windows in the dorms that they live in on the Foxconn factory campus. So think about that when you're working on your iPhone. Bad things are still done to people. It's just sort of out of sight, out of mind, so that we can still live a life of luxury, a life of excess here in America. So Franklin's essay is as relevant today as ever. It could easily be rewritten about the savages of the world, and it would not be the people who would be the first people to come to our mind, our self-centered minds here in America. It would be us. In America, per person, we burn more fossil fuels than any country on Earth, and of course that is what is leading to climate change, and we will be some of the last people on Earth to suffer for it. Other islands, coastal areas in other parts, much poorer parts of the world, are going to suffer the effects of climate change much more so than we will here. At first, of course, it's all headed our way. So Franklin is, frankly, a genius in this essay. He's extremely, he's my favorite founding father because he was so incredibly bright and funny, and he had this way of seeing the obvious around him, which was just not obvious to other people. And studying literature should always open our eyes to ourselves, to our culture, to what we do. And now more than ever, we can look at the savageries that we commit, that we don't see, but the Franklins among us do.